Welcome to Unsolved Historical Mysteries. What really happened to the princes in the tower? The mystery of the princes in the tower begins with their identities, two young boys who were heirs to the English throne yet met an uncertain and tragic fate. To understand the significance of their disappearance, we must first explore who Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury were, their roles within the royal family, and the circumstances that brought them to the Tower of London. 1. Edward V, the promising young king. Edward V, born on November 2, 1470, was the eldest son of King Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville. His birth occurred during one of the most tumultuous periods in English history, the Wars of the Roses, a dynastic conflict between the rival houses of York and Lancaster. Edward's arrival was seen as a symbol of hope for the Yorkist cause, solidifying his father's position as king. From a young age, Edward was groomed for kingship. As Prince of Wales, he was educated in governance, diplomacy, and military strategy, reflecting the expectations placed upon him as a future monarch. Chroniclers of the time described him as intelligent, articulate, and dignified, traits that hinted at his potential as a capable ruler. His close relationship with his mother, Elizabeth Woodville, further strengthened his image as the centerpiece of the Yorkist dynasty. However, Edward's life took a dramatic turn in April 1483, when his father died unexpectedly. At just 12 years old, Edward became king. His ascension, while ceremonially significant, was overshadowed by his youth and inexperience. In an era of political intrigue and power struggles, a child king was especially vulnerable to manipulation and betrayal. 2. Richard of Shrewsbury, the loyal younger brother. Richard of Shrewsbury, born on August 17, 1473, was the second son of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville. As the Duke of York, Richard held a prestigious position in the royal family, though his role was secondary to that of his elder brother. Nevertheless, Richard's upbringing was no less significant. Like Edward, he received an education befitting a prince, focusing on chivalry, statecraft, and the responsibilities of nobility. Richard and Edward shared a strong bond. Contemporary accounts suggest that the brothers were close, supporting one another as they navigated the complexities of royal life. Together, they represented the future of the Yorkist dynasty, a powerful image of unity during a time of division. Richard's role became more critical following their father's death. As Edward V ascended the throne, Richard of Shrewsbury stood as the next in line, reinforcing the stability of the Yorkist claim. Yet, this very position made both boys targets in the political turmoil that followed. 3. The road to the Tower. The boys' journey to the Tower of London began in the immediate aftermath of Edward IV's death. Traditionally, the Tower served as a royal residence and a secure location for monarchs awaiting coronation. Edward V's uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was appointed Lord Protector, tasked with guiding the young king until he came of age. Under the guise of ensuring Edward's safety, Richard had the boy moved to the Tower in May 1483. At the time, this seemed like a routine decision. However, tensions within the royal court quickly escalated. Elizabeth Woodville, fearing for her son's safety, sought sanctuary in Westminster Abbey with her remaining children. Meanwhile, Richard of Shrewsbury was later brought to the Tower to join his elder brother, ostensibly to prepare for Edward's coronation. 4. Life in the Tower. Initially, Edward and Richard's lives in the Tower appeared normal. They were reportedly seen playing in the gardens and interacting with their attendants. Yet, as Richard of Gloucester consolidated power, their situation changed. Edward's coronation was postponed indefinitely, and the boys were increasingly isolated. By June 1483, rumors began to spread. Richard of Gloucester declared Edward and Richard illegitimate, citing a precontract in their parents' marriage. This move effectively removed them from the line of succession, clearing the path for Richard to claim the throne as Richard III. Following his coronation, the princes were rarely, if ever, seen again. 5. The significance of their identities. The boys were not just heirs to the throne. They were symbols of the Yorkist legacy. Their presence in the Tower was both a political statement and a source of tension. For Richard III, their existence posed a threat to his legitimacy. For Henry Tudor and his supporters, they represented obstacles to future plans for uniting the warring factions under the Tudor banner. Their tragic story begins with their identities. As sons of Edward IV, figures of hope in a divided kingdom. Yet their confinement in the Tower marked the beginning of their transformation from living heirs to historical enigmas. The danger faced by Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury was rooted in the volatile political landscape of late 15th century England. The Wars of the Roses had left the kingdom fractured, with rival factions vying for power. In this precarious environment, the young princes found themselves at the center of a struggle that would ultimately determine the fate of the English crown. 1. The death of Edward IV, a fragile throne. The sudden death of Edward IV in April 1483 was a turning point in the Yorkist dynasty. Edward IV had been a strong and decisive ruler, whose victory in the Wars of the Roses secured the throne for the House of York. His death, however, left a power vacuum that exposed the vulnerabilities of his young heir, Edward V. At just 12 years old, Edward V was too young to rule independently. The concept of a child king was not new, but it required the establishment of a regency, where a trusted protector would govern on behalf of the monarch until he came of age. Edward IV had named his brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, as Lord Protector, a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. 2. Rivalries within the royal family. The appointment of Richard as Lord Protector did not sit well with everyone, particularly Elizabeth Woodville, the boy's mother, and her powerful Woodville family. The Woodvilles had risen to prominence through Elizabeth's marriage to Edward IV, and they were viewed by many as opportunistic and overly ambitious. Their influence at court created deep divisions among the nobility, with some aligning against them in favor of Richard of Gloucester. Richard capitalized on this tension, positioning himself as a stabilizing force amid the chaos. In his role as protector, he quickly moved to secure control of Edward V by having him brought to London. However, this action sparked a chain of events that would escalate the power struggle between Richard and the Woodvilles. Richard accused key members of the Woodville family of plotting against him. This led to the arrest and execution of Elizabeth's brother, Anthony Woodville, and her son from her first marriage, Richard Grey. These moves effectively dismantled the Woodvilles' power base, leaving the young princes isolated. 3. The legitimacy crisis. To solidify his position, Richard introduced a claim that Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville was invalid due to a precontract, a previous betrothal to another woman. This declaration rendered all of Edward IV's children illegitimate, including Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury. If true, this meant that neither boy had a rightful claim to the throne. The legitimacy crisis was a pivotal moment. By removing the princes from the line of succession, Richard cleared the path for his own coronation as Richard III. This decision, however, would haunt him, as it cast doubt on his motives and intensified suspicions about the prince's safety. 4. The role of Richard III. As protector turned king, Richard III faced intense scrutiny. While his supporters argued that his actions were necessary to stabilize the kingdom, his critics accused him of ambition and betrayal. The transition from trusted uncle to monarch placed Richard in a precarious position, where the prince's existence became both a political liability and a moral dilemma. Richard's consolidation of power coincided with the prince's removal from public view. This timing fueled speculation that their lives were in danger. Whether Richard actively sought to harm them or merely sought to neutralize their political threat remains a subject of debate. What is clear, however, is that their confinement in the Tower of London marked the beginning of their disappearance. 5. A kingdom on the brink. The disappearance of the princes occurred in a kingdom teetering on the edge of civil war. Richard III's rise to power alienated many Yorkist loyalists, some of whom turned to Henry Tudor as an alternative leader. This instability created an environment where any perceived threat, including the princes, could have been seen as too dangerous to ignore. In this context, the prince's fate was shaped not just by family rivalries, but by the broader power struggles that defined the Wars of the Roses. Their lives were intertwined with the ambitions of those who sought to rule, making them symbols of both hope and peril in a divided England. The disappearance of Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury from the Tower of London is one of the most haunting and enigmatic events in English history. While the exact details remain unknown, the sequence of events leading to their vanishing provides key insights into the political intrigue and secrecy of the time. Let's reconstruct what we know about their final days. 1. Arrival at the Tower of London. Edward V was moved to the Tower of London in May 1483, ostensibly in preparation for his coronation. At the time, the Tower served a dual purpose. It was both a royal residence and a fortress. Monarchs traditionally stayed there before their coronation at Westminster Abbey. To many, this relocation seemed routine. Shortly after, Richard of Shrewsbury joined his brother in the Tower. The young duke's arrival marked a shift in their circumstances. As time passed, it became clear that the Tower was not just a temporary home for the princes but their prison. Initially, the boys were reportedly seen playing in the Tower's gardens, and their attendants were described as loyal and caring. However, as Richard of Gloucester consolidated power and declared himself king, the boys' appearances became increasingly rare. By the summer of 1483, rumors began to circulate that the princes were no longer being seen by anyone outside their immediate attendants. 2. Richard III's coronation and the prince's isolation. On June 26, 1483, Richard of Gloucester was crowned King Richard III. His coronation followed a series of calculated moves to delegitimize his nephews, including the claim that their parents' marriage was invalid. This cleared the path for Richard to seize the throne, but it also raised questions about the prince's future. As Richard's reign began, the princes were moved deeper into the Tower. Some accounts suggest that their attendants were dismissed and replaced with individuals loyal to the new king. This increased their isolation, effectively cutting them off from the outside world. By late summer, the boys had disappeared entirely from public view. Chroniclers of the time, such as Dominic Mancini, reported that Edward V seemed to suspect his fate. Mancini wrote that Edward's demeanor changed during his confinement, describing the young king as anxious and withdrawn. 3. Theories of murder. The disappearance of the princes gave rise to numerous theories, with many accusing Richard III of orchestrating their deaths. The most widely accepted narrative, popularized by Thomas More, alleges that Richard ordered the boys to be smothered in their sleep. According to Moore, the act was carried out by Sir James Tyrrell, who later confessed under duress. However, this account has been criticized for its lack of corroborating evidence. Moore's narrative was written decades after the events, and served to reinforce Tudor propaganda against Richard III. Critics argue that while Richard had the motive to eliminate the princes, there is no definitive proof that he ordered their deaths. 4. Alternative theories. Other theories suggest that the princes may have been killed by different figures, possibly without Richard III's direct involvement. The Duke of Buckingham, once a staunch supporter of Richard, has been implicated as a potential perpetrator. His later rebellion against Richard suggests a complex relationship that may have included ulterior motives. Another possibility is that the princes were killed after Richard's death, perhaps by Henry VII or his supporters. By the time Henry Tudor claimed the throne in 1485, the prince's existence would have posed a direct challenge to his legitimacy. Henry's silence on the matter and his failure to investigate the boys' fate have raised suspicions about his role in their disappearance. 5. The skeletons in the tower. In 1674, workers renovating the Tower of London discovered two small skeletons buried beneath a staircase. These remains were widely believed to be those of the princes, and were interred in Westminster Abbey. However, no definitive identification has been made, as the bones have not undergone modern scientific testing. The discovery of the skeletons added a physical dimension to the mystery, but also deepened the uncertainty. If the bones are indeed those of Edward and Richard, who buried them there, and why? If they are not, then where are the true remains of the princes? 6. A vanishing into history. The disappearance of the princes in the Tower remains a defining moment in the Wars of the Roses. It is a story of lost innocence, political intrigue, and the lengths to which individuals will go to secure power. While the details of their fate may never be fully known, their absence continues to haunt history as one of its most enduring mysteries. Among the many suspects in the mystery of the princes in the Tower, Richard III stands as the most infamous. His rise to power coincided with their disappearance, leading many to point the finger at him as the primary culprit. But was Richard truly responsible for their fate? Or has history unfairly cast him as a villain? 1. The case against Richard III. The accusations against Richard III stem largely from his actions before and after becoming king. As Lord Protector, Richard was entrusted with the care of Edward V and his brother. However, within weeks, he moved decisively to delegitimize their claim to the throne. By declaring their parents' marriage invalid, he paved the way for his own coronation on June 26, 1483. Once Richard was crowned, the prince's visibility declined sharply. Contemporary rumors, recorded by chroniclers like Thomas More, accused Richard of ordering their murder to eliminate potential threats to his reign. The narrative was simple yet damning. Richard, a man who had seized power through questionable means, removed the final obstacle to his absolute rule. 2. Richard's reputation: villain or victim of propaganda? While the case against Richard seems compelling, it's worth considering the historical context. Much of the evidence comes from sources written during or after the Tudor dynasty, which had every reason to discredit Richard. Thomas More's account, for example, was penned during Henry VIII's reign, decades after Richard's death. These accounts often portray Richard as a scheming, deformed tyrant, a characterization that served to justify the Tudors' rule. Modern historians have questioned this portrayal, suggesting that Richard's actions may have been pragmatic rather than sinister. As a ruler, He faced numerous challenges, including uprisings and dissent among the nobility. Eliminating the princes, while ruthless, would have been a calculated move to secure his throne in a time of instability. 3. The evidence thin and circumstantial. One of the challenges in definitively blaming Richard is the lack of concrete evidence. No direct orders, written records, or eyewitness testimonies link him to the prince's deaths. The discovery of 2 skeletons in the Tower of London in 1674 provided potential physical evidence, but without modern analysis, their identities remain unconfirmed. Richard's actions as king also complicate the narrative. He instituted legal reforms, promoted fairer governance, and gained support among the common people. These achievements contrast sharply with the image of a cold-blooded murderer. Could Richard have truly been so calculating as to mask such a crime, while pursuing policies aimed at justice? 4. Alternative perspectives. Some historians argue that Richard's innocence cannot be ruled out. The prince's disappearance may have been orchestrated by other ambitious figures, seeking to destabilize his rule. Henry Tudor, who later became Henry VII, is a key alternative suspect. After defeating Richard at the Battle of Bosworth, Henry had the most to gain from the prince's deaths. Their survival would have posed a direct threat to his claim to the throne. Others suggest that the princes might not have been killed at all. Instead, they could have been secretly removed from the tower, either by loyalists hoping to protect them or by conspirators seeking to leverage their status. These theories, while speculative, highlight the uncertainty that surrounds Richard's involvement. 5. The verdict on Richard III. Richard III's role in the prince's disappearance remains one of history's great enigmas. While the circumstantial evidence against him is strong, it is far from definitive. His reputation as a villain may owe as much to Tudor propaganda as to his actual deeds. Until more evidence emerges, the question of whether Richard was truly the architect of their fate remains unanswered. Richard's legacy, shaped by mystery and controversy, forces us to confront the complexities of medieval power struggles. Was he a ruthless usurper willing to commit murder for the throne? Or was he a scapegoat in a politically motivated narrative? The truth, as with so many historical mysteries, may lie somewhere in between. The disappearance of the princes in the Tower is often attributed to Richard III, but another figure had much to gain from their absence. Henry Tudor, later crowned Henry VII. His victory over Richard at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 marked the end of the Wars of the Roses. But could he have also played a role in eliminating the princes to solidify his claim to the throne? 1. Henry Tudor's path to power. Henry Tudor's claim to the English throne was tenuous at best. As a descendant of the Lancastrian line through his mother, Margaret Beaufort, his bloodline was viewed as weak compared to the Yorkist princes. Furthermore, his exile in Brittany during much of the conflict kept him distant from the power struggles in England. It wasn't until Richard III's reign faced widespread discontent that Henry's supporters saw an opportunity to bring him to power. The princes in the Tower posed a direct challenge to Henry's legitimacy. As the sons of Edward IV, Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury had a stronger claim to the throne. Even after Richard III's death, their survival would have been a rallying point for Yorkist loyalists. For Henry, securing his reign meant ensuring the princes could never challenge him. 2. Evidence against Henry VII. While Henry Tudor is not often the first suspect in the prince's disappearance, there are reasons to scrutinize his role. After his victory at Bosworth, Henry consolidated power by marrying Elizabeth of York, the prince's sister, uniting the houses of York and Lancaster. This marriage bolstered his claim to the throne, but it also placed him in a precarious position. If the princes were alive, their existence could undermine his authority. Some historians argue that Henry may have had the princes killed after becoming king. He would have had the resources and motivation to locate and eliminate any remaining Yorkist claimants. Notably, Henry never launched an investigation into their disappearance, a curious omission for a ruler seeking to legitimize his reign. By leaving the matter unresolved, he avoided drawing attention to a potential crime tied to his ascent. 3. The role of Perkin Warbeck. One of the most intriguing pieces of evidence connecting Henry VII to the prince's fate is the case of Perkin Warbeck. In the 1490s, Warbeck claimed to be Richard of Shrewsbury, the younger of the two princes, and gathered support from European monarchs and discontented Yorkists. Henry treated Warbeck as a serious threat, capturing and executing him in 1499. If Warbeck's claim had been true, it would suggest that one of the princes had survived Richard III's reign. But even if Warbeck was an impostor, his emergence highlights the persistent danger posed by the prince's legacy. For Henry VII, ensuring that no legitimate Yorkist heirs remained was critical to maintaining his power. 4. Motives and methods. Henry's potential involvement in the prince's disappearance reflects the brutal realities of medieval politics. Eliminating rivals was a common practice among monarchs seeking to secure their rule. Henry's reluctance to address the prince's fate publicly may have been a calculated move to avoid implicating himself, while allowing suspicion to remain focused on Richard III. However, some argue that Henry's methods were subtler. Rather than ordering the prince's deaths directly, he might have used their presumed demise as a propaganda tool to strengthen his claim. By portraying himself as a unifier of England and casting Richard III as a villain, Henry solidified his image as a legitimate king despite his weak bloodline. 5. The unanswered question. Did Henry VII order the murder of the princes, or did he simply benefit from their absence? The lack of concrete evidence leaves this question unresolved. What is clear is that the prince's disappearance removed the final obstacle to Henry's claim, enabling him to establish the Tudor dynasty. Henry's reign marked the beginning of a new chapter in English history, but the shadow of the prince's fate lingered over his legacy. Whether he was directly involved or merely an opportunist, Henry VII's role in this mystery underscores the lengths to which rulers would go to secure power in a volatile and divided kingdom. While Richard III and Henry VII are the most discussed figures in the mystery of the princes in the Tower, other theories suggest the involvement of lesser-known players or alternative explanations. Could others have conspired to remove the princes? Or were their fates sealed by circumstances beyond direct political ambition? 1. The role of the Duke of Buckingham. One compelling theory involves Henry Stafford, the Duke of Buckingham, a key ally of Richard III during his rise to power. Buckingham was instrumental in supporting Richard's claim to the throne, but his motivations were complex. Some suggest that Buckingham's loyalty was rooted in his own ambitions, and he may have viewed the princes as obstacles to his potential influence or future power. In late 1483, Buckingham led a rebellion against Richard III, aligning himself with Henry Tudor. This sudden betrayal has fueled speculation about his role in the prince's disappearance. Could Buckingham have acted independently, either to curry favor with Richard or to remove the princes as bargaining chips in his alliance with Henry? His execution later that year prevents us from knowing the full extent of his involvement. 2. A loyalist rescue attempt? Not all theories about the prince's fate involve murder. Some propose that loyalists to the Yorkist cause may have orchestrated a secret escape. If true, the princes could have been spirited out of the tower and hidden away, perhaps living in anonymity to avoid detection by Richard III or Henry VII. However, this theory faces significant challenges. No credible evidence of such a rescue has emerged, and the logistical difficulties of smuggling two high-profile figures out of the heavily guarded tower make it unlikely. Still, the idea persists, fueled by stories of boys claiming royal heritage appearing in various parts of Europe in the years following the prince's disappearance. 3. The influence of foreign powers. The political instability in England during the late 15th century did not go unnoticed by European powers. France, Burgundy, and other states had vested interests in the outcome of the Wars of the Roses. It is possible that foreign agents played a role in the prince's disappearance, either by exploiting the situation for political gain, or by seeking to destabilize Richard III's rule. For instance, Margaret of Burgundy, Edward IV's sister and a staunch Yorkist supporter, actively worked against Henry VII later in his reign. Could she have been involved in a scheme to protect her nephews, or even to fake their deaths to challenge Richard's authority? While speculative, such theories underscore the international dimension of this domestic mystery. 4. The possibility of natural causes. Another, less sinister possibility is that the princes may have died of natural causes while in the tower. Medieval England was rife with disease, and the cramped, unsanitary conditions of the tower could have exposed the boys to fatal illnesses. If this were the case, Richard III might have concealed their deaths to avoid the political fallout, or to prevent their bodies from becoming a rallying symbol for Yorkist loyalists. This theory aligns with the lack of clear evidence for murder, but does little to explain the subsequent rumors and speculations. Moreover, it seems unlikely that the deaths of both princes would occur so conveniently for Richard's consolidation of power. 5. The mystery endures. The wide range of theories surrounding the prince's disappearance reflects the enduring fascination with this historical puzzle. From high-stakes political assassinations to covert rescue attempts, the possibilities highlight the complexity of the Wars of the Roses and the intricate web of alliances and betrayals that defined the era. Ultimately, the lack of definitive evidence leaves room for speculation, and each theory adds a new layer to the mystery. Whether the princes fell victim to murder, illness, or exile, their story serves as a haunting reminder of the fragility of power and the human cost of ambition. The disappearance of the princes in the tower has left historians with little concrete evidence, but the sparse accounts from contemporaries provide tantalizing clues. While no eyewitnesses came forward directly to describe the prince's fate, second-hand accounts and rumors paint a picture of secrecy, suspicion, and fear. These fragments of testimony help us piece together the story, though they raise as many questions as answers. 1. The chroniclers of the time. Several chroniclers, writing during or shortly after the events, mentioned the prince's disappearance. Among the most notable is Dominic Mancini, an Italian visitor to England. Mancini's account, written in 1483, provides a rare near-contemporary perspective. He described how Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury were taken to the Tower of London and initially treated with care, but he noted that their public appearances ceased shortly after Richard III's coronation. Mancini claimed that Edward's servants were dismissed and replaced with men loyal to Richard III. He also suggested that the young king began to suspect his fate. While Mancini's report offers valuable insights, it was written after he had left England and relies heavily on hearsay. making it difficult to verify its accuracy. 2. Thomas More's account. Thomas More's History of King Richard III is one of the most detailed narratives about the prince's fate, but it was written decades after the events and is heavily influenced by Tudor propaganda. More described how Richard III allegedly ordered the murder of the princes, employing Sir James Tyrrell to oversee the act. According to More, Tyrrell instructed two men, Miles Forrest and John Dighton, to smother the boys as they slept. While vivid, More's account is problematic. It was written during the reign of Henry VIII, when portraying Richard III as a villain served political purposes. Moreover, More was a child at the time of the prince's disappearance, so his narrative is based on second-hand stories and lacks corroborating evidence. Still, it remains one of the most cited accounts in discussions about the prince's fate. 3. Rumors and whispered confessions. Beyond the written accounts, rumors of the prince's demise circulated widely. One claim came from John Roos, a chronicler who initially praised Richard III, but later condemned him, accusing him of murdering the princes. Roos's dramatic shift in tone suggests that his later writings were influenced by the Tudor regime. Additionally, confessions related to the prince's fate reportedly surfaced during Henry VII's reign. For instance, Sir James Tyrrell was arrested and executed for treason in 1502, and some sources claim he confessed to orchestrating the murder of the princes on Richard III's orders. However, these confessions were never documented in detail, leaving their validity in doubt. 4. Silence and fear. The absence of direct testimony is also telling. The political climate of the time was fraught with danger, and openly speaking out against Richard III, or later, Henry VII, could result in severe punishment. Many individuals who may have known the truth likely remained silent out of fear. This culture of silence extended even to those in positions of power. Nobles and courtiers close to Richard III had little incentive to reveal information about the princes, especially if it implicated them in wrongdoing. Similarly, those serving under Henry VII avoided addressing the matter, as it could undermine the legitimacy of the Tudor dynasty. 5. The limits of eyewitness accounts. While contemporary accounts offer glimpses into the prince's disappearance, their reliability is undermined by bias, political motivations, and the passage of time. The lack of consistent, verifiable testimony leaves the mystery shrouded in uncertainty. However, these accounts remain invaluable for understanding the broader context and the ways in which the story of the princes has been shaped by history. By examining these fragments of testimony, we can see how the narrative of the princes in the Tower evolved into one of the most enduring mysteries of the medieval world. Even as we question the accuracy of these sources, they serve as a foundation for further investigation into this haunting tale. In 1674, workers renovating the Tower of London made a chilling discovery. Beneath a staircase, two small skeletons were unearthed. The discovery reignited the mystery of the princes in the Tower, with many speculating that these remains belonged to Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury. But is there enough evidence to conclusively identify them as the missing princes? The discovery of the skeletons. The skeletal remains were found buried in a wooden box, approximately 10 feet beneath a staircase in the White Tower. Their size and condition suggested that they belonged to children, aligning with the ages of Edward V and Richard at the time of their disappearance. The bones were incomplete, but their discovery, under such unusual circumstances, led many to believe they were the long-lost princes. King Charles II ordered the bones to be interred in Westminster Abbey in 1678. They were placed in an urn, inscribed with the claim that the remains were those of Edward V and his brother. This act, while honoring the presumed identities of the remains, did little to confirm their origins scientifically. 2. The challenges of identification. The identification of the bones as the princes is far from conclusive. In 1933, the urn was briefly opened, and the remains were examined by anatomists. Their analysis supported the theory that the skeletons were those of children around the correct ages. However, the techniques available at the time were rudimentary, and the findings were largely based on visual observations rather than modern forensic methods. No DNA analysis or radiocarbon dating has been conducted on the bones, leaving key questions unanswered. Without such testing, it is impossible to confirm whether the skeletons are those of Edward and Richard, or even to determine their exact ages or causes of death. 3. Alternative theories. Skeptics have proposed alternative explanations for the remains. Some suggest that the bones may belong to other individuals, possibly the children of Tower staff or victims of unrelated events. The Tower of London has a long and tumultuous history, serving as both a royal residence and a prison. Over centuries, numerous executions and burials occurred within its walls, making it plausible that the skeletons belong to entirely different individuals. Additionally, the location of the burial raises questions. If the princes were murdered in the Tower, why would their bodies be buried in such a conspicuous location? This has led some to speculate that the skeletons might have been planted later, either to distract from the true fate of the princes or as part of a political narrative. 4. The call for modern testing. Modern forensic technology, including DNA analysis and isotope testing, could potentially resolve the mystery of the skeletons. Advances in these fields allow scientists to extract genetic material, even from degraded remains, making it possible to compare the DNA of the bones with known descendants of the prince's family. Despite these possibilities, no modern testing has been conducted. The Church of England, which oversees the remains in Westminster Abbey, has resisted calls for exhumation. Their stance is based on concerns about disturbing the dead, and the lack of a clear benefit to historical understanding. This reluctance has frustrated historians and researchers, who believe that such tests could provide definitive answers. 5. A symbolic mystery. The untested remains have become a symbol of the broader uncertainty surrounding the prince's fate. While they may offer a tangible link to the mystery, the lack of definitive evidence means they remain an enigma. For some, the skeletons represent a lost opportunity to uncover the truth, while for others, they serve as a reminder of the limits of historical investigation. The question of whether these bones belong to Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury continues to fuel debate. Until modern analysis is permitted, their identity, and the fate of the princes, remains unresolved. The fate of the princes in the Tower is a centuries-old mystery, but modern scientific techniques could hold the key to uncovering the truth. From DNA analysis to forensic archaeology, today's technology offers tools that were unimaginable in the past. Yet, despite these advancements, the mystery remains unsolved. Let's explore the possibilities and challenges of applying modern science to this historical puzzle. 1. DNA analysis unlocking genetic secrets. DNA analysis has revolutionized the study of historical remains, offering the ability to match skeletal remains to known family members. In the case of the princes, researchers could compare DNA from the bones interred in Westminster Abbey with living descendants of the Yorkist line, such as those related to the prince's sister, Elizabeth of York. One notable example of this technique's success is the identification of Richard III's remains in 2012, using mitochondrial DNA from a living descendant. Scientists confirmed that a skeleton found beneath a car park in Leicester was indeed Richard III. This breakthrough demonstrated the potential of DNA analysis to resolve historical mysteries, sparking renewed calls to test the Westminster Abbey bones. However, extracting viable DNA from the prince's remains poses significant challenges. The bones were discovered centuries ago and may have suffered contamination or degradation. Additionally, permission to conduct such tests remains a significant obstacle, as the Church of England has thus far denied requests for exhumation. 2. Radiocarbon dating and isotope analysis. Radiocarbon dating is another powerful tool that could shed light on the mystery. By measuring the decay of carbon isotopes in the bones, scientists could estimate the age of the remains. If the results align with the timeline of Edward V and Richard's disappearance, it would strengthen the case that the bones are theirs. Isotope analysis could also provide insights into the princes' lives. By examining the chemical composition of their teeth and bones, researchers can determine aspects of their diet, health, and even geographic movements. This information could confirm whether the remains are consistent with what is known about the prince's upbringing in the royal court. Despite these possibilities, there are limitations. Radiocarbon dating may not be precise enough to distinguish between remains from the late 15th century and those from other periods. Additionally, isotope data might not provide definitive evidence of the prince's identities without corroborating genetic matches. 3. Forensic examination reconstructing the scene. Forensic anthropology and pathology could offer insights into the manner of the prince's deaths. If the bones show signs of trauma or suffocation, it would support the theory that they were murdered. Alternatively, the absence of such evidence could lend credence to the idea that they died of natural causes. In cases like this, forensic techniques can also reveal the conditions of burial, the position of the skeletons, the type of coffin or container, and the surrounding materials can provide clues about the circumstances of their interment. Were the bones hastily buried, suggesting a secretive crime? Or were they treated with care, indicating an official burial? The examination conducted in 1933 provided some initial findings, but it was limited by the technology of the time. A modern reanalysis could uncover details that were previously overlooked, offering a clearer picture of what happened to the princes. 4. The ethical debate to test or not to test. Despite the potential for scientific breakthroughs, the question of whether to test the remains is deeply contentious. The Church of England has cited ethical concerns about disturbing the dead and argued that the historical significance of the mystery does not justify exhumation. Critics of this stance contend that resolving the mystery is important for historical understanding and could bring closure to one of England's most enduring enigmas. Proponents of testing argue that the benefits of modern science outweigh the risks of disruption, particularly given the historical importance of the prince's story. This ethical debate reflects broader questions about the balance between scientific curiosity and respect for the past. Should the pursuit of knowledge take precedence, or should the remains of the dead be left undisturbed? 5. The future of investigation. Until permission is granted for further analysis, the mystery of the princes in the tower remains unresolved. However, advances in forensic science continue to open new possibilities. Techniques such as 3D imaging, genetic sequencing, and even artificial intelligence may one day provide answers without the need for invasive procedures. As the tools of investigation evolve, so too does our understanding of the past. The story of the princes serves as a reminder of how history and science intersect, offering the potential to uncover truths long buried, whether through DNA, isotopes, or forensic reconstruction. The possibility of solving this ancient mystery remains tantalizingly within reach. The mystery of the princes in the tower persists, not only because of the lack of evidence, but also because of the layers of secrecy and propaganda that have obscured the truth. Why has the fate of Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury remained unresolved for more than 5 centuries? Let's explore the factors that have kept this case shrouded in uncertainty. 1. Political agendas and historical records. One of the main reasons the truth about the princes remains hidden lies in the political agendas of those who ruled after their disappearance. Richard III's reign was brief, ending in 1485 with his defeat at the Battle of Bosworth. His successor, Henry VII, had little incentive to investigate the prince's fate. Any inquiry could have implicated Henry, or revealed evidence that might undermine his legitimacy. The Tudor dynasty, which Henry VII founded, sought to cement its authority by vilifying Richard III. Chroniclers like Thomas More and Raphael Holinshed were commissioned to write histories that portrayed Richard as a tyrant and murderer. These accounts, while influential, were heavily biased and served to obscure the facts. Over time, this propaganda became accepted history, leaving little room for alternative narratives. Additionally, the historical records from the late 15th century are incomplete, with gaps that make it difficult to piece together a definitive timeline. Documents that might have shed light on the prince's disappearance could have been deliberately destroyed or altered to protect those in power. 2. The culture of silence. The political climate of the late medieval period discouraged open discussion of sensitive matters, especially those involving the royal family. Those who might have known the truth about the prince's fate would have been reluctant to speak out, fearing retribution from the crown. This culture of silence extended beyond Richard III's reign. Under Henry VII, any mention of the princes could be seen as a challenge to the Tudor dynasty. The risk of being accused of treason was enough to ensure that many remained quiet. This lack of testimony has left historians with little to work with, forcing them to rely on fragmented and often contradictory accounts. 3. Propaganda and myth-making. The enduring mystery of the princes in the Tower has been shaped by centuries of myth-making. Richard III's depiction as a villain, popularized by William Shakespeare's play Richard III, has overshadowed other interpretations of his character. While Shakespeare's portrayal was based on Tudor propaganda, it solidified the image of Richard as the likely murderer of his nephews. This narrative has proven difficult to challenge, even as modern historians have re-evaluated Richard's actions. The lack of definitive evidence allows these myths to persist, creating a story that is as much a product of fiction as it is of history. 4. The role of the skeletons. The discovery of 2 skeletons in the Tower of London in 1674 added a new layer of complexity to the mystery. While many assumed the remains belonged to the princes, the absence of scientific analysis has left their identity unconfirmed. This uncertainty has fueled speculation and competing theories, rather than resolving the mystery. By interring the remains in Westminster Abbey, without definitive proof of their identity, Charles II's government may have unintentionally perpetuated the enigma. Without answers, the skeletons have become a symbol of the unanswered questions surrounding the prince's fate. 5. Why the truth may never be known. The passage of time has further obscured the truth about the princes. Physical evidence may have been lost, and the biases of contemporary chroniclers have made it difficult to separate fact from fiction. Even with modern technology, the chances of uncovering definitive proof are slim, as permission to test the Westminster Abbey bones remains elusive. The lack of resolution has turned the princes in the tower into a canvas for speculation, allowing each generation to project its own theories onto the case. This perpetual ambiguity ensures that the story remains compelling, even as it frustrates efforts to find the truth. The mystery of the princes in the tower has sparked intense debate among historians for centuries. With limited evidence and numerous conflicting accounts, opinions about what truly happened to Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury remain deeply divided. Let's examine the main schools of thought and the reasons for their ongoing disagreements. 1. The traditional view: Richard III as the villain. For much of history, Richard III has been cast as the principal villain in the story of the princes in the tower. This interpretation, rooted in Tudor propaganda, argues that Richard ordered the murder of his nephews to secure his throne. Supporters of this theory point to his actions before and after their disappearance, particularly his declaration of their illegitimacy and his coronation in 1483. Thomas More's account and William Shakespeare's portrayal in Richard III have heavily influenced this view. These narratives depict Richard as a cold, calculating usurper willing to commit murder to eliminate threats to his power. For many, the circumstantial evidence aligns too neatly to dismiss his culpability. However, critics argue that this interpretation relies on biased sources. Richard's defenders suggest that his reputation was unfairly tarnished by the Tudors, who had every reason to discredit him. This leads to alternative theories that shift the blame elsewhere. 2. The revisionist perspective: Richard's innocence. In recent decades, some historians have sought to rehabilitate Richard III's image. Revisionists argue that there is no direct evidence linking Richard to the prince's deaths. They emphasize his accomplishments as a ruler, including legal reforms and efforts to strengthen England's governance, as evidence that he was not the villain history has portrayed. Revisionists also highlight the lack of contemporary accusations against Richard. While rumors about the princes circulated, no formal charges were brought against him during his reign. This silence, they argue, suggests that Richard may not have been responsible, or that the princes were still alive when he was killed in 1485. Instead, revisionists propose alternative scenarios, such as the possibility that the princes were killed by others within Richard's court, or even after his death by Henry VII. 3. The case against Henry VII. Another school of thought implicates Henry VII in the prince's disappearance. After defeating Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth, Henry had every reason to ensure the princes could not challenge his claim to the throne. If the boys were still alive when he took power, eliminating them would have been a pragmatic, albeit ruthless, move to secure his reign. Supporters of this theory point to Henry's failure to investigate the prince's fate. As king, he could have used their disappearance to further tarnish Richard III's reputation, yet he remained largely silent on the matter. This silence, combined with the possibility that Henry may have had access to the tower during his reign, raises questions about his role in the mystery. 4. Other theories: complexity and speculation. Beyond Richard III and Henry VII, other theories suggest that the prince's fate was the result of a more complex conspiracy. Some argue that factions within the Yorkist or Lancastrian camps may have acted independently, viewing the princes as pawns in a larger power struggle. The possibility that the princes were secretly removed from the tower also persists. Proponents of this theory believe that loyalists could have smuggled the boys to safety, explaining why no definitive evidence of their deaths exists. However, the lack of credible sightings or documentation makes this scenario difficult to prove. 5. The ongoing debate. The absence of conclusive evidence has ensured that the debate over the prince's fate remains unresolved. Historians continue to analyze the available accounts, re-examine biases, and explore new interpretations. The emergence of modern forensic techniques offers the potential for breakthroughs. But until permission is granted to analyze the Westminster Abbey bones, the mystery will likely remain speculative. The division among historians reflects not only the complexities of the case, but also the challenges of interpreting history through incomplete and often contradictory sources. The story of the princes serves as a reminder of how historical narratives are shaped by those in power, and how those narratives can evolve as new perspectives emerge. The mystery of the princes in the tower has persisted for centuries, but advances in modern technology and historical methodology offer new ways to investigate their fate. While challenges remain, the tools and approaches of today provide hope that the truth may one day come to light. Let's explore the potential avenues for future research. 1. Exhumation and scientific testing. One of the most direct approaches to solving the mystery involves exhuming the bones interred in Westminster Abbey and subjecting them to modern scientific analysis. DNA testing, for instance, could compare the remains to living descendants of the prince's family, such as members of the Yorkist or Tudor lines. This would establish whether the bones belonged to Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury. Radiocarbon dating could also help confirm the time period of the bones, ensuring they align with the prince's disappearance in the late 15th century. Forensic examination might reveal clues about the manner of death, such as signs of trauma or suffocation, which could support or refute murder theories. However, this approach faces significant ethical and procedural barriers. The Church of England, which oversees Westminster Abbey, has thus far resisted calls for exhumation, citing respect for the dead and the lack of a clear benefit to historical understanding. Overcoming these objections would require a compelling case for the importance of the investigation. 2. Re-examining historical records. While physical evidence is limited, the wealth of historical documents from the late 15th century remains a valuable resource. Advances in digital archiving and analysis could help researchers uncover overlooked or misinterpreted records. For example, letters, court records, and financial documents from Richard III's and Henry VII's reigns may contain subtle clues about the prince's fate. Collaborative projects among historians, archivists, and data scientists could employ machine learning to analyze vast quantities of historical texts. This technology can identify patterns, connections, and anomalies that human researchers might miss. By revisiting primary sources with modern tools, it may be possible to piece together a clearer narrative of what happened. 3. The role of archaeology. The Tower of London, a site steeped in history, has the potential to yield further archaeological discoveries. While much of the tower has been extensively studied, unexplored areas could still contain clues, such as burial sites or artifacts linked to the princes. Ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies could identify potential excavation sites without disrupting the structure. Archaeological investigations could also extend beyond the tower. Sites associated with Yorkist or Tudor supporters might hold evidence of secret plots or movements that could shed light on the prince's final days. By expanding the scope of the search, researchers could uncover new perspectives on the case. 4. Interdisciplinary collaboration. The complexity of the princes in the Tower mystery demands a multidisciplinary approach. Historians, Forensic scientists, archaeologists, geneticists, and even psychologists can all contribute unique insights. For example, psychological analysis of historical figures could help interpret their motivations and decisions, providing context for the actions of Richard III, Henry VII, and others. Public engagement and citizen science initiatives could also play a role, crowdsourcing efforts to transcribe and analyze historical documents have proven successful in other fields. By involving the public, researchers could expand their resources and draw attention to the importance of solving the mystery. 5. The value of solving the mystery. Beyond satisfying historical curiosity, solving the mystery of the princes in the tower has broader implications. It could illuminate the political dynamics of the Wars of the Roses, challenge or confirm long-held narratives about Richard III and Henry VII, and provide a deeper understanding of medieval power struggles. Uncovering the truth would also demonstrate the power of modern science and historical methodology to resolve ancient mysteries. It would serve as a testament to humanity's enduring quest for knowledge and justice, offering closure to a story that has fascinated generations. The story of the princes in the tower is not just a tale of mystery and tragedy. It is a window into the dynamics of power, ambition, and human nature. Beyond the unanswered questions, the fate of Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury offers valuable lessons about history's complexity and the consequences of political conflict. Let's explore the key historical lessons this case can teach us. 1. The fragility of power. The disappearance of the princes highlights the fragile nature of monarchy, particularly during times of political instability. In 15th-century England, the crown was not a secure institution, but a prize to be claimed, often by force. The Wars of the Roses exemplified this instability, with rival factions willing to go to extreme lengths to seize or maintain power. Edward V's brief reign underscores how vulnerable child monarchs were. In such an environment, at just 12 years old, Edward was thrust into a volatile political landscape, where his youth and inexperience made him an easy target for manipulation. His fate serves as a reminder of how power, even when inherited, can be precarious without the means to defend it. 2. The cost of political ambition. The actions of figures like Richard III and Henry VII illustrate the lengths to which individuals will go to secure authority. Whether or not Richard was directly responsible for the princes' deaths, his rise to power involved calculated moves that ultimately led to their disappearance. Similarly, Henry VII's consolidation of the Tudor dynasty came at the expense of suppressing Yorkist claims, potentially including the elimination of the princes. This ruthless pursuit of power comes with a human cost. The princes, though born into privilege, became pawns in a deadly game of politics. Their story reminds us that political ambition often exacts a toll on the most vulnerable, leaving behind a legacy of loss and uncertainty. 3. The role of propaganda in shaping history. The case of the princes in the tower demonstrates how history is often written by the victors. The Tudor dynasty's portrayal of Richard III as a villain was instrumental in legitimizing Henry VII's rule. By framing Richard as a usurper and murderer, the Tudors deflected attention from their own actions and reinforced their claim to the throne. This manipulation of historical narratives teaches us to approach historical accounts with a critical eye. The story of the princes, as told through the lens of Tudor propaganda, highlights the need to question the motives and biases of those who document history. It is a reminder that history is not just a record of events, but a reflection of the power structures that shape its telling. 4. The persistence of unsolved mysteries. The enduring mystery of the prince's fate illustrates the challenges of uncovering truth in history. The lack of definitive evidence, combined with conflicting accounts and centuries of speculation, has made it difficult to arrive at a conclusive answer. This case highlights how historical mysteries can remain unresolved, even with the passage of time and the advent of modern technology. The lesson here is that history often resists simple explanations. Complex events, particularly those involving power struggles, are rarely straightforward. The story of the princes invites us to embrace ambiguity, and to recognize that some questions may never be fully answered. 5. The universal themes of power and justice. At its core, the story of the princes in the tower resonates because it reflects universal themes of power, justice, and the human condition. The prince's tragic fate serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the fragility of innocence in the face of political conflict. It also raises enduring questions about accountability and the pursuit of truth. By studying this case, we gain insight not only into the specifics of 15th century England, but also into the broader patterns of history. The lessons of the princes remind us that history is not just about understanding the past, it is about using those insights to inform our present and future. The disappearance of the princes in the tower is a stark example of the devastating human cost of power struggles. Beneath the political maneuvers and historical intrigue lies a tragic story of two young boys caught in the crossfire of ambition and betrayal. Their fate underscores how the pursuit of power often leaves devastation in its wake, affecting not just kings and queens but the most innocent among us. 1. The princes as pawns in a dangerous game. Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury were born into one of England's most powerful families, yet their royal lineage ultimately became their greatest vulnerability. In the tumultuous period of the Wars of the Roses, they represented a dynastic threat to anyone who sought to consolidate power. For Richard III, the boys symbolized a challenge to his rule, even after he declared them illegitimate. For Henry VII, their existence could have undermined his claim to the throne. The prince's disappearance was not just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of how power struggles turn individuals into pawns in a larger game of control. This dehumanization is a recurring theme in history, where the ambitions of the powerful often come at the expense of those unable to defend themselves. The prince's fate reminds us of the vulnerability of those caught in the midst of political upheaval. 2. The ripple effects of ambition. The tragedy of the princes did not end with their disappearance. Their loss created a ripple effect that extended far beyond their lifetimes. Richard III's role in the mystery, whether real or perceived, contributed to his downfall, casting a shadow over his reign and fueling rebellion among his enemies. His defeat at the Battle of Bosworth marked the end of the Plantagenet dynasty and the beginning of the Tudor era. Henry VII's rise to power was similarly shaped by the prince's absence. Their disappearance allowed him to claim legitimacy for his rule, yet it also haunted his reign. The shadow of the Yorkist line lingered, manifesting in uprisings like those led by Perkin Warbeck, who claimed to be Richard of Shrewsbury. These events highlight how the consequences of political ambition often ripple through generations, leaving lasting scars on history. 3. Innocence lost. The prince's story resonates deeply because it is a tale of innocence lost. Edward and Richard were children, far removed from the complexities of politics and power. Yet their youth did not shield them from the brutal realities of their time. Their tragic fate serves as a reminder that the pursuit of power often spares no one, regardless of age or innocence. This loss of innocence is a universal theme that transcends historical contexts. The story of the princes reminds us that the victims of power struggles are often those least equipped to defend themselves, whether they are children, civilians, or marginalized groups. It forces us to confront the ethical dimensions of ambition and the human cost of political conflict. 4. Lessons for the present. The tragedy of the princes offers lessons for modern times. While the dynamics of power have evolved, the underlying themes of ambition, betrayal, and the human cost of conflict remain relevant. The prince's fate invites us to reflect on the ways in which political struggles continue to impact innocent lives, from the collateral damage of wars to the exploitation of vulnerable populations in the pursuit of power. By examining the story of Edward and Richard, we are reminded of the importance of accountability, compassion, and justice in leadership. Their story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of placing power above humanity, offering a timeless message about the ethical responsibilities of those who govern. 5. A tragedy that endures. The disappearance of the princes in the Tower remains one of history's most poignant tragedies. It is a story not just of two boys, but of a nation divided, of ambition unchecked, and of the fragility of innocence in the face of power. Their fate continues to haunt us, serving as a powerful reminder of the human cost of political conflict. As we seek to understand their story, we confront questions that are both historical and deeply human. What does it mean to pursue power at all costs? And how can we ensure that the most vulnerable among us are protected from its consequences? These are the questions that the prince's story leaves behind, questions that remain as relevant today as they were over 500 years ago. The mystery of the princes in the Tower is more than just an unresolved historical puzzle. It is a symbol of how hidden truths shape our understanding of the past and influence the way we interpret the present. Studying such mysteries is not just an exercise in curiosity. It is a vital endeavor that teaches us about power, ethics, and the human condition. Let's explore why uncovering hidden secrets in history matters. 1. Understanding power dynamics. The disappearance of Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury offers a case study in how power operates. History often glorifies leaders and focuses on their achievements, but hidden stories like that of the princes reveal the darker side of governance, the ruthlessness, ambition, and manipulation that often underpin political authority. By examining these hidden aspects, we gain a fuller picture of how power is wielded and the consequences it has on individuals and societies. The prince's story reminds us that history is not just a record of great deeds, but a tapestry woven with both triumphs and tragedies. Understanding these dynamics helps us critically analyze modern leadership and recognize patterns of behavior that repeat across time. 2. The importance of ethical reflection. The story of the princes forces us to confront difficult ethical questions. How far should individuals go to secure power? What responsibilities do leaders have to protect the vulnerable? And how should we judge historical figures whose actions were shaped by the norms of their time? These questions are not just academic, they resonate in today's world, where ethical dilemmas often arise in politics, business, and society. Studying the prince's fate encourages us to reflect on our own values and the ethical frameworks we use to evaluate actions, both past and present. 3. The role of propaganda in shaping history. One of the reasons the prince's story remains unresolved is the influence of propaganda. The Tudor dynasty's efforts to vilify Richard III and promote its own legitimacy demonstrate how those in power can manipulate narratives to serve their agendas. This manipulation has left a legacy of confusion and debate. that persists to this day. By studying this case, we become more aware of how historical accounts are shaped by bias and political motives. This awareness is crucial in a world where misinformation and propaganda continue to influence public perception. Understanding the construction of historical narratives equips us to question the sources of information we encounter and seek out the truth. 4. The human element of history. The Prince's story is not just about kings and politics. It is about two young boys whose lives were cut short by forces beyond their control. Their tragedy reminds us that history is made up of individual lives, each with its own hopes, struggles, and dreams. Focusing on the human element of history fosters empathy and a deeper connection to the past. It reminds us that the actions of the powerful have real consequences for ordinary people, and it encourages us to advocate for justice and accountability in our own time. The prince's fate serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of protecting the vulnerable and ensuring that their stories are not forgotten. 5. The value of seeking the truth. Uncovering hidden truths in history is a pursuit that enriches our understanding of the world. The mystery of the princes in the tower may never be fully resolved, but the effort to investigate it has already yielded valuable insights into the political, cultural, and social dynamics of medieval England. This pursuit of truth is a fundamental part of the human experience. It reflects our desire to make sense of the past, learn from its lessons, and apply that knowledge to create a better future. By studying historical mysteries, we affirm the importance of curiosity, critical thinking, and the ongoing quest for understanding. 6. A legacy of inquiry. The princes in the tower stand as a symbol of history's enduring mysteries, challenging us to look beyond surface narratives and ask deeper questions. Their story teaches us that history is not a static record, but a living discipline, constantly evolving as new evidence and perspectives emerge. As we continue to explore hidden stories like theirs, we honor the lives of those who came before us, and ensure that their voices are heard, even across the centuries. In doing so, we recognize the importance of history not just as a record of the past, but as a guide to the present and a foundation for the future. The mystery of the princes in the tower has captivated historians and the public for centuries. Over the course of this exploration, we have delved into the lives of Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, examined the political struggles that placed them in peril, and considered the potential motives and actions of figures like Richard III and Henry VII. Each layer of this story reveals the complexity of power, ambition, and human vulnerability in a time of intense political upheaval. 1. Revisiting the key points. We began by introducing the young princes, heirs to the Yorkist throne, whose lives were tragically intertwined with the Wars of the Roses. From their imprisonment in the Tower of London to their sudden disappearance, their fate became a symbol of the fragile nature of monarchy in medieval England. We examined the accusations against Richard III, the theories implicating Henry VII, and the possibility of other conspirators. Each perspective offered insights but no definitive answers. The discovery of skeletal remains in 1674 provided a glimmer of hope for resolution. Yet the lack of scientific analysis has left the identity of the bones unconfirmed. Modern techniques like DNA testing and forensic analysis offer potential pathways to uncovering the truth. Yet, ethical and procedural barriers have prevented further investigation. Meanwhile, the historical records, shaped by propaganda and bias, continue to fuel debate among historians. 2. The broader lessons of the mystery. The story of the princes is more than just a historical whodunit. It is a lens through which we can examine the consequences of power struggles, the manipulation of narratives, and the enduring impact of human ambition. It reminds us that history is not just about kings and queens, but about the lives affected by their decisions. This case also serves as a powerful example of how mysteries can evolve over time, shaped by the biases of those who tell the story. It challenges us to question historical narratives and seek the truth, even when the answers remain elusive. 3. Questions for the future. What would happen if the remains in Westminster Abbey were subjected to modern scientific analysis? Would it finally resolve the mystery? Or would it simply raise more questions? How do we balance the pursuit of knowledge with respect for the dead? And most importantly, how does understanding the past help us navigate the challenges of the present? These questions invite us to think critically about the role of history in our lives. The princes in the tower may never receive a definitive resolution, but their story continues to inspire curiosity, debate, and reflection. 4. Engaging with the audience. Now, we turn the question to you. What do you think happened to the princes in the tower? Do you believe Richard III was guilty? Or could another figure have been responsible? If given the chance, would you support modern scientific testing to uncover the truth? Or do you think some mysteries are best left unsolved? We encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. This channel thrives on the exchange of ideas, and your perspective could shed new light on this enduring mystery. 5. Looking ahead. The story of the princes in the tower is just one of many unsolved historical mysteries. From lost civilizations to enigmatic artifacts, history is filled with questions waiting to be answered. By exploring these tales, we not only learn about the past, but also about ourselves, the values, ambitions, and challenges that define humanity. If you've enjoyed this journey into history's shadows, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button. Together, we can continue to uncover the secrets of the past and bring these forgotten stories to life. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the princes in the tower. The mystery remains unsolved, but the search for answers continues. Stay curious, stay questioning, and we'll see you in the next chapter of history's greatest enigmas. If you found this video helpful or interesting, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.